Imagine this: a butterfly flaps its wings in the dense jungles of the Amazon. A few weeks later, a hurricane devastates the Gulf Coast. Coincidence? Maybe. But what if I told you that, in theory, this tiny, almost invisible movement of air could set off a chain reaction, ultimately leading to a massive storm halfway across the world? It sounds unbelievable, almost magical, doesn't it? But this idea, the so-called butterfly effect, is at the heart of one of the most mind-bending concepts in science, chaos theory. But hold on, what exactly is chaos theory? It's a branch of mathematics that deals with systems so complex, so sensitive, that small changes in their initial conditions can lead to wildly different outcomes. In simpler terms, chaos theory explains why certain things are just impossible to predict, why small differences in the beginning can make enormous differences in the end. Now, let's travel back to the 1960s, when this concept was born. Picture this: Edward Lorenz, a meteorologist, is sitting in front of one of the first computers, running a weather prediction model. As a shortcut, he enters a rounded-off number into the machine, a tiny, nearly insignificant change. He expects the same result as before, but instead, the computer spits out a forecast that's completely different from the original. Lorenz is puzzled. How could such a small, barely noticeable change cause such a drastic shift in the outcome? That's when he stumbles upon something groundbreaking. In certain systems, small changes in the initial setup can make predictions impossible beyond a certain point. This was the birth of chaos theory. The idea challenges the very foundation of how we understand the world. For centuries, we believed that if we knew all the factors at play, we could predict anything. If you throw a ball, for example, and you know its speed and angle, you can easily predict where it will land. But chaos theory flips that notion on its head. In some systems, like weather, climate, and even the human brain, prediction is far more complicated, sometimes impossible. That's because these systems are nonlinear. Small tweaks at the start can spiral into massive, seemingly chaotic outcomes, and the system can behave in ways that are incredibly hard to predict. It's as if the universe has a level of unpredictability woven into its fabric. This brings us back to the butterfly effect. The idea is not that a butterfly literally causes a hurricane, but that in chaotic systems, like the atmosphere, tiny changes can compound, leading to vast differences over time. The flap of a butterfly's wings might alter air currents just enough to shift the path of a storm thousands of miles away. But chaos isn't just about weather. In fact, chaos is all around us. From the swirl of cream in your coffee to the growth of cities, from the beating of your heart to the flicker of neurons in your brain, chaotic systems rule the world. Take a moment to think about traffic. Ever notice how just one car slowing down can cause a ripple effect that leads to a traffic jam miles back? That's a chaotic system at work. The interaction of thousands of vehicles, all reacting to small disturbances. Someone changes lanes, someone taps the brakes, creates a system that's almost impossible to predict. In fact, chaos theory can even explain why weather forecasts are only accurate for a few days. The further out you try to predict, the less accurate your forecast becomes, because small variables too small to measure start to have a larger impact. This is known as sensitive dependence on initial conditions, a core principle of chaos theory. It's what makes long-term predictions in chaotic systems so difficult. You could measure every gust of wind and every drop of rain, but there will always be tiny factors so small they seem irrelevant, that lead to massive unpredictability over time. Yet, chaos theory isn't just about randomness. While chaotic systems are unpredictable, they are not without structure. In fact, there are often patterns hidden within the chaos, patterns that repeat at different scales. This brings us to one of the most visually stunning manifestations of chaos theory: fractals. Fractals are geometric shapes that repeat themselves over and over at different scales. Think of the jagged edges of a coastline, the branches of a tree, or even the tiny blood vessels in your body. Zoom in or zoom out, and you'll see the same pattern repeating endlessly. These fractals are nature's way of creating complexity from simple rules. Take the Mandelbrot set, one of the most famous fractal patterns. It's a shape that, at first glance, looks like a swirling blob. But if you zoom in, no matter how close you get, you'll find that it keeps unfolding, revealing the same patterns in smaller and smaller forms. This infinite complexity from simple rules is one of the most beautiful examples of chaos theory in action. But chaos theory doesn't stop there. It also has profound implications for understanding biological systems. Think about the human heart. It doesn't beat like a perfectly wound clock. Instead, it has slight variations, small chaotic fluctuations in rhythm. It turns out that these variations are crucial for health. A heart that beats with too much regularity can actually be a sign of disease. The chaotic nature of its rhythm is what keeps it flexible and adaptive. And then there's the brain. The firing of neurons is another chaotic system. Thoughts, memories, emotions, they all arise from the interactions of billions of neurons, each influencing the others in complex, nonlinear ways. This is why the brain is so adaptable and creative, but also why it's so hard to predict human behavior. Our brains are chaotic machines, constantly adjusting and reacting to the tiniest inputs from the world around us. But what about the larger scale? Can chaos theory help us understand the evolution of life itself? Absolutely. Take ecosystems. They're a perfect example of a chaotic system. Each species interacts with others in complex ways, forming a delicate web of relationships. Small changes like the introduction of a new species or a slight change in climate can ripple through the ecosystem, causing dramatic shifts. It's the same principle as the butterfly effect, but on a much larger scale. And it doesn't stop there. Chaos theory also has applications in economics, engineering, even social behavior. Stock markets, for example, are chaotic systems. Small changes in investor sentiment can cause huge swings in prices. That's why financial models often struggle to predict long-term trends because the system is sensitive to tiny, unpredictable factors. In engineering, understanding chaos can help us build better machines. For example, certain chaotic systems can help predict mechanical failures or the flow of fluids in pipes. Engineers study these systems to prevent breakdowns and optimize performance. And when it comes to social behavior, chaos theory helps explain why societies evolve in unpredictable ways. Small events and invention, a political movement, a natural disaster can lead to massive, unforeseen shifts in culture, politics, and history. At its core, chaos theory reminds us of one powerful truth. The world is not as simple as it seems. Small things can have enormous impacts, and the systems we thought were predictable are, in fact, filled with uncertainty. But rather than be intimidated by this unpredictability, we can embrace it. Chaos teaches us that while we can't predict everything, we can still find beauty in the patterns that emerge from disorder. The butterfly's wings may be small, but their effect on the world is anything but. So, the next time you see something that seems chaotic, remember, there may be hidden order, patterns we can't yet see, and forces we're just beginning to understand. That's the magic of chaos theory. Our world is far more interconnected and sensitive than we ever imagined.